Story 1. Understanding the flow of traffic is essential. After driving for years, you realize that you don't drive as they teach you. Instead, you go with the flow. It's also important to understand braking distance, feel for your car and other drivers, and learn how to react accordingly. Story 2. Honestly, press on the gas. You can't press too hard and you can't press too softly. You need to meet somewhere in the middle. Story 3. There is a long stretch of learning to drive where you worry you are not paying enough attention, leading you to hyperfocus on every little thing. You are not really a good driver until your situational awareness becomes largely automatic, like breathing. You do not need to actively think about everything at all times, and trying to do so will only make you anxious and distracted. Know where you are going, who is around you, and the rules of the road, and you are 95% of the way there without having to concentrate excessively. Figuring that out and becoming comfortable with it takes some effort. Story 4. What should you do when the people around you aren't following the rules you were just taught? At a four-way stop, the rules are based on who arrived first and who is on the right. However, none of that matters when a careless driver decides they have priority over everyone else. Story 5. Fully recognizing the importance of defensive driving and remaining alert is essential. Speeding tickets are unpleasant to receive, but they were effective in changing my behavior. After my third speeding ticket, I significantly reduced my speeding and still maintain my license to drive. I have not caused any accidents or injuries. Story 6. Keeping track of all the road signs and priorities is important. Driving the car itself isn't that hard. It's the entire experience of being on the road with other people in potentially dangerous vehicles. Story 7. The other drivers on the road use their turn signals inconsistently. They leave their signals on without turning, or they turn without signaling. My favorite is when they sit at a red light and only signal right as it turns green. Come on, you have been sitting there for a couple of minutes. Just use your turn signal. Story 8. For me, it was relaxing enough to press just hard enough to accelerate the car. I kept speeding and then stopping suddenly, which was pretty bad. Now it feels smooth and brings out the color of my eyes. Story 9. It's like rubbing your tummy and patting your head. Learning to operate the clutch, gear, and brake while indicating, steering, watching what everyone else is doing, and using mirrors to signal and maneuver. Story 10. Not recognizing that you are being taught to pass a test, and that you will learn to drive 2 or 3 years after passing. Story 11. Getting the muscle memory down, I felt that friends who grew up driving golf carts adjusted much better. Story 12. How mentally fatiguing it is. Once you're accustomed to it and it becomes reflex and muscle memory, it's fine. However, when you are learning and actively trying to remember all the things you need to do, such as keeping track of other drivers, checking mirrors, signaling, reading signs, remembering speed limits, and navigating, it can be exhausting and overwhelming. Sometimes at the end of my lessons, I would have a headache and feel very tired. Story 13. You will undoubtedly make a few mistakes, and while you will be mostly okay, they will certainly rattle you. Story 14. I learned to drive a manual car. Being stopped on an incline with a car behind me and trying to coordinate my feet and hands before I began rolling backward into the car was terrifying. Story 15. Learning to navigate. I also had a strong fear of cutting off a car that could be in my blind spot. Story 16. Learning how to handle the vehicle in icy conditions can be challenging. The first time you start sliding while you hold the brake, it can make your heart race. Visit a large empty parking lot after a significant snowfall to get a feel for how the car handles. Story 17. Honestly, aside from reckless drivers, bicycles that sometimes appear unexpectedly, and children who cross the road without looking, I'd say my main challenge has been learning how to use the mirrors. Sometimes I still have difficulty determining which lane the car behind me is in or how far away it actually is. I've become more confident in overcoming this fear, but I would never change lanes unless I'm completely sure it is safe to do so. I would rather inconvenience others than risk colliding with another vehicle. Story 18. Modern cars create a barrier that makes it difficult to assess how close you are to objects. A relaxed instructor is definitely necessary. Story 19. Here were my experiences. Completely stopping at the toll booth to hand the attendant the money, and being prepared for a stoplight with backed-up traffic behind a blind curve. Story 20. Make sure your instructor makes you feel comfortable. If you get one who is overly strict about every little thing, it will only make you more nervous. Story 21. For me, it was important to understand the size of your car. I know that sounds silly, but realizing how far you actually are from the yellow lines, how much space you need before changing lanes, and the available space in front or behind you when parallel parking took me some time to grasp. Story 22. It takes time to coordinate your left hand, left foot, and right foot to perform 4 different tasks simultaneously. Once you gain control of that aspect, typically, it is the feet that develop muscle memory first. The rest involves just a few details. Story 23. The light turns yellow. At my distance from the light, when it turns yellow, should I slam on the brakes to stop? How long does the light stay yellow? When I got my license, yellow lights were my worst enemy. I kept thinking, but what's the math? Story 24. Learn to manage stress until driving becomes easy. When learning, there are many things to pay attention to which can make you feel anxious, overwhelmed, and stressed. Story 25. I need access to a car for practice. I have to complete around 200 supervised hours of driving, and hourly driving instructors are quite expensive. Story 26. The rules you must follow in the test versus the rules you need to adhere to in real life. Story 27. Understanding that no matter how much you follow rules, there will always be people on the road who never consider them. You could do all the right things, and there will always be someone who acts illegally and believes they are in the right. You just have to let them be, even if it almost leads to a dangerous situation. Story 28. Learning to trust in your abilities while maintaining a healthy skepticism of other drivers on the road is essential. I am confident in my skills as a driver. It is other drivers that I do not trust. Story 29. Noticing the world around you. Operating the vehicle, like anything else, will become second nature the more you do it. That's not the problem. The problem is responding to situations that arise while you drive. How do you react to someone swerving around you, bad weather, or a mechanical problem? Took me a while, but I learned to anticipate what someone would do. For example, if you're in the middle lane and another car is in the right lane, it could be because they want to take the next exit, but they just got on this road 10 seconds ago. Chances are they won't take the exit and will merge into my lane, but they are right next to me in my blind spot. I have priority as I'm still the faster car, so they have to merge. However, knowing they might be unpredictable, they could speed up and cut me off instead of going behind me. Story 30. The yelling next to you was intense. I ended up waiting too long for help from either of them and did not get my license until I was nearly 20. I finally paid for professional lessons and passed my test on the first try. Felt great. Story 31. The anxiety of getting the clutch to the biting point quickly as the lights turn green, before the drivers behind me become frustrated, was overwhelming. I really disliked that. Story 32. For me, it was about understanding the physics of the machine I was trying to operate. What is the turning circle at different speeds? I had no idea. What is the braking distance at different speeds? I had no idea. I didn't even know that if you want to stop a car quickly, you don't just press the brake pedal. You have to press it, then release it a little, and then press it again. I am certain that this knowledge would have been useful to know before I needed it, rather than after. Story 33. Some cars just slow down and you don't understand why. Is there something on the road? Does the driver have a seizure? Is the engine failing? No, they just want to go somewhere else. Even though they drive automatic vehicles and have one hand free, they won't ever use their turn signals. Some cars change lanes, and after they are almost done, they finally use their turn signals. So instead of signaling their intentions, they let you know they are finished changing lanes. Well, thanks, elderly driver. Also, thanks for going 80 all the time when the speed limit is either 70 or 100, and for ignoring the 30 only at night sign. Instead, you go 30 all the time instead of 50 during the day. I really want to get up 10 minutes earlier every day and get home later while constantly fearing for our lives because you're too old to drive, and the government doesn't regularly check on your driving skills or eyesight, only when it's too late. Story 34. For me, it was remembering all the little details, like who has the right of way in situations where a light does not specifically indicate it. Story 35. Realizing that everyone else on the road is an unpredictable non-player character. You are not just learning to drive, you are learning to predict chaos. Story 36. The hardest part about learning to drive a manual transmission vehicle is mastering the clutch. It feels like trying to be smooth and graceful while taming a grumpy mechanical beast. If you go too slow, you stall. If you go too fast, you jerk forward as if you just got rear-ended by a truck. And the hills? There's pure panic every time. Story 37. Take turns at or below 20 miles per hour. You do not sit centered in the car, nor are you at the edge of it. You are about 35% of the way across. Highway exit signs indicate the approximate speed to take the exit. You can allow yourself a 5-mile-per-hour leeway unless it is 30 miles per hour or lower. Then go the posted speed. Learn to be comfortable with coasting. It is not all gas or brake. Lastly, regardless of whether you ever plan on riding a motorcycle or not, read the Motorcycle Rider's Manual. It teaches useful information even for driving a car. Story 38. For my daughter, it's about learning how not to react the way she normally does when something startles her or heightens her anxiety. This means fighting the urge to look away, close her eyes, throw her hands over her face, or scrunch up to make herself small to get away from what's happening. In the passenger seat, this has occurred when an animal runs in front of us, whether it's a squirrel or a deer, when she thinks a truck isn't seeing us and is coming into our lane, or when she believes other cars are about to crash. She has done a good job, but she has only been on the road a few times to practice, which worries me a bit. The good thing is that she is observant, but the downside is that her awareness also makes her scared of many things. I love driving and did not find any part of learning to drive particularly difficult. I even enjoy parallel parking, although I would likely hesitate to attempt it in a large pickup truck. For me, the hardest aspect of learning to drive was understanding when to start braking. I learned to drive in several different vehicles, all with varying brake sensitivities, weights, and sizes. I adapted quickly, but there were many sudden stops when I realized I wasn't braking quickly enough and slow crawls when I braked too soon. Story 39. It's been almost 2 decades since I started learning to drive, but I remember that relaxing my muscles was my greatest difficulty. Story 40. When your dad is the type of teacher who only yells whenever you make minor mistakes, he teaches you many driving skills, but may also leave you with self-esteem and confidence issues that can last a lifetime. Story 41. Learning to drive a manual transmission car. My oldest brother drove us to the community center parking lot, which was about 15 minutes away. He got out, had a friend take him home, and left me to drive home in a manual. I made it back home safely about an hour later, but stalled a few times at traffic stops. Story 42. In modern times, I have taught 3 teenagers how to drive over the last 5 years. Their biggest problem is that they don't know where to go. They have spent most of their lives in cars looking at electronics and don't know where anything is. Story 43. Be aware of other drivers. They will act unexpectedly and make you wonder how they obtained a license in the first place. Story 44. Real answer. Stopping distance and control. In training and practice, there is essentially no method for adequately teaching this because hard stopping can be incredibly risky regarding vehicle control and is not good for the vehicle. Stopping, even rapid slowing, at high speed is the main way people completely lose control of the vehicle they are driving. However, learning this skill is fundamentally essential. It is worth practicing, but it can put significant stress on the car you use. Otherwise, do your best to maintain a minimum distance of 1 car length behind someone in slow traffic and more at higher speeds. Story 45. Learning good judgment involves being courteous to other drivers and understanding who has the right of way in different situations. Story 46. I passed everything on the first try. I would say that it's mostly about learning signs, muscle memory, and instincts. The more you overthink it, the more you'll doubt yourself. So just have fun, be safe, and trust yourself. Story 47. I knew how to drive before I began and had plenty of experience tests driving the old car I was repairing. The instructor took us out in groups of 3. When it wasn't my turn, I sat in the back seat, terrified. He instructed one person to turn left. He turned half left and then accelerated into the trees on the opposite corner. Story 48. Learning new skills involves remembering and focusing on many things simultaneously, making it easy to forget something and make a mistake. The solution is simple. Keep practicing. Eventually, you will develop muscle memory, allowing you to perform these tasks automatically as a reflex. Story 49. Very slow maneuvering around obstacles, such as pulling up to a parking block or driving between two objects, can be challenging for new drivers. Many are unfamiliar with the appropriate amount of input needed for brakes and acceleration, and can panic if too much is applied. Story 50. Manual transmission. My first car had one, and my dad gave up on trying to teach me because he had never driven a manual. The first traffic light on a hill with a car behind me was a nerve-wracking experience. It was a 30-degree incline, and cars at that time didn't have the hill assist feature to prevent rolling back. Nowadays, I play with the clutch and move back and forth for fun. But when I was 16, it was definitely scary. Story 51. Being in the way of other people when turning left and getting honked at made me nervous. However, when I realized that there are plenty of careless drivers on the road and that we are all qualified to be there, I allowed myself to make mistakes sometimes. Eventually, I improved. Story 52. Situational awareness involves learning to read the road and the traffic around you. It includes observing traffic on a freeway while merging at the same speed as other vehicles. You should look ahead at traffic lights that are turning orange, slow down without slamming on the brakes, and be mindful of how close the car behind you is. All these small factors add up. Driving in cities exacerbates these challenges due to increased traffic that is often more unpredictable. Additionally, there are pedestrians and public transport options such as buses and trams. You must also consider people on bicycles and electric scooters, all moving at different speeds, while ensuring your own safety on the road. Story 53. I learned to drive an automatic in 2004, and that was pretty easy. However, I am currently learning to drive a manual car with my little brother, and he is constantly yelling at me that I am ruining his special edition Subaru, which costs $50,000. Apparently, I am damaging his brakes and clutch. Story 54. Your dad was yelling at you the entire time, but in all seriousness, parallel parking and driving in heavy traffic were challenging. My dad wanted to ensure I learned to run before I walked, and I don't approve of or encourage this approach. He made me drive on the expressway during the first week of learning and essentially told me, "If you mess up, you could kill us." I was terrified going 75 miles per hour right as rush hour was about to start. I became quite skilled at driving in heavy traffic, but after he felt I was ready to take on smaller tasks, I was braking very harshly because I was used to braking differently at higher speeds. Even now, my braking is still inconsistent. Story 55. I was always reminded that I was in a heavy vehicle traveling at 40 miles per hour and could die at any moment if something went wrong. I can't think of a more dangerous task that we all have to do daily. Story 56. Getting the timing right when releasing the clutch and stepping on the gas is important. It wasn't too difficult on flat ground, but getting started on a hill took some time to get used to. Story 57. For me, it was about judging the space between my car and other objects, especially when parking. I swear, curbs and poles have a way of sneaking up on you. Story 58. My mom makes up the most random things. She pretends that a cat might run across the road or that someone is going to open their door while driving. No, you can't change the seat because it's mine. Why aren't you driving properly? I can't turn the wheel because my knees get in the way. Story 59. Automating the movement of your arms and legs allows you to focus your mental energy on observing the traffic around you. Story 60. For me, it was about getting out of my own head and gaining the confidence to drive. Getting accustomed to the wheel and pedals takes some time, and I became frustrated quickly. Turns out that driving a car is not the same as playing Mario Kart 64. Once I got the hang of it, my confidence soared, but it's important to keep that in check as well. Story 61. For me, the hardest part about learning to drive was definitely parallel parking. It feels like you need to perfectly gauge the space and your car's angle all at once, and it's very stressful when you're trying to avoid curbs or other cars. Honestly, I still don't think I could do it, especially not by myself. Story 62. I would assume that if your parents were ever in an accident with you in the car, dealing with the trauma from that car accident could be challenging. Since I have experienced trauma from car accidents, and no one was injured in any of them, driving will likely trigger that trauma for me. Therefore, I am not driving until I am sure the trauma has completely healed. Story 63. Makes a slight left turn into the turning lane that is too far to the left. Dad, what was that? Are you trying to kill us, you moron? Story 64. Getting someone to teach you if your parents refuse can be challenging. Driver's education includes lessons, but you still need to practice, and the cost of $60 an hour adds up quickly. I am grateful that my boyfriend taught me when I was 19. Story 65. For me, it was learning to park and overcoming the fear of being between two cars without enough space. Story 66. Sensitivity to brakes was the biggest challenge for me. I struggled with braking too hard and braking too late. Additionally, I needed to understand blind spots and the size of large vehicles. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.